Jeremiah the prophet who spoke from the mouth of the Lord. So Jeremiah goes to Zedekiah, and Jeremiah being Jeremiah and the other prophets who were God's mouthpieces said, okay, Zedekiah, you need to get yourself right. Okay, you're the king, you're God's man, you're who God has allowed to be in place in the kingdom. You need to change some things. You need to have a heart for God, you need to lead his people the right way, and you need to get your house in order and get things straight. And Jeremiah says, Zedekiah says no. He says, no, I hear what you're saying. Not only, the important thing about knowing who Jeremiah is that he's acting in God's place. The prophets were God's mouthpieces. So when a prophet approached you and said, you need to get your life right, you need to get your act together, that was like God himself coming before you and doing that. So Zedekiah is not only rejecting Jeremiah the prophet, but he's rejecting God himself because he's a proud man. And he says, I'm in control of my life. I know what I'm doing. I can take care of business. I don't need God. I don't need God. I can make my own decisions. Why should I submit to anyone? Why should I submit to God? And he rejects Jeremiah, the very mouthpiece God himself represented in human form. He's a proud man. Pride is one underlying reason that we don't give our heart to God. Another is rebellion. Rebellion is the next reason why we don't ultimately give our heart to God. We see that represented in Nebuchadnezzar. What do we have there in verse 13? It says, they also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar. What does that mean? Well, what happened was when Nebuchadnezzar came in and he set up Zedekiah as king, he made him promise to make a vow before God that he would obey Nebuchadnezzar. He says, okay, I'm taking your nephew out of here. You're going to be the king now. Let's make an arrangement. Let's make a deal, a pact before God that you're going to do what I say. Zedekiah's like, oh yeah, that's cool, you know. I mean, they strike hands, they make a pact. Yeah, I'll see, Nebuchadnezzar. I'll do what you want me to do. You're putting me in charge. That's fine. And you see that Nebuchadnezzar is wise to God's people when he knows how things works because he makes him what? Swear before God. He says, you promised me before God, and I know because you're God's people, that you will obey, you'll honor your word because you're one of God's people. You're those people. That's what he says. That's what he knows, and that's what he sets up and establishes. Little does Nebuchadnezzar know that Zedekiah is really just playing him. And he says, no, even though I made that promise, that pact or agreement, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't really know how things are between God and I. Don't really listen to God, so of course, promising God I'm going to do something really doesn't matter, doesn't make a difference. And we see that not only is he proud, but he rebels against Nebuchadnezzar and ultimately against God. God has allowed Nebuchadnezzar to come in and to lead his people off into slavery. And even though it seems terrible, how could God allow something like that? Nonetheless, God did. And Nebuchadnezzar was being used by God in this particular situation to do what God wanted him to do. And even though Nebuchadnezzar is a pagan king, he still, ultimately, is being controlled and used by God. And Zedekiah made a commitment and a promise to listen to him. And instead, he chooses to rebel. Rebellion is another reason why we won't give our heart to God. We go, I don't need God over me. I don't need somebody over me. And I certainly don't need to listen to what they have to say, and I don't need to let them lead me. The third reason that we don't give our heart to God oftentimes is just downright stubbornness. So not only does Zedekiah, not only is he proud, not only does he rebel, but he's also downright stubborn. So he rebels against Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God. He made him make a promise, a commitment that he didn't keep. And it says that he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning toward the Lord, the God of Israel. So not only is he doing this stuff that represents his inward heart attitude, but we even have God saying here, in 2 Chronicles, from the very text, that Zedekiah has hardened his heart and completely turned away from God. It's this idea of a stiff that's what a stiff neck means, stubbornness in Scripture. Zedekiah is a stubborn man. Not only is he proud, not only is he rebellious, but he's also stubborn. He says, even though Jeremiah, God's man, is talking to me and telling me I need to fix these things, I need to get right, I'm just not going to listen. I've made my decision. I'm going to live the way I want to live. I'm going to call the shots in my own life. And that's going to be that. Stubbornness. The third underlying reason that we won't give our heart to God. And these are all attitudes that we're susceptible to as people, even as believers. Satan will do nothing more than to allow these attitudes, these aspects of an unwillingness to give our hearts to God to creep in and to destroy us and lead us astray. It could be pride. It could be rebellion. It could just be stubbornness. These are all things we need to watch out for. God is calling us to give our heart to Him today. There's this great statue that I want to get that I found. It's fantastic. It's got a great saying on it. The statue itself actually says, "Be an organ donor, give your heart to God." That's fantastic to me. That's a great statue. And I got to thinking about what that means, that idea of being, when you're an organ donor, for those of you who are, and it's on your licenses and all that, when you die, they pretty much harvest your body and they take what they want, right? For medical research or for helping out people, whatever the case is. Do you get that back? I would hope not. Do they give that to your family? No, I would hope not. What do they do with it? They give it away. It goes to someone else, and it's never to be seen by you or anyone close to you again, most likely. That's what God is calling for today. He's calling for us to donate our hearts to Him, to give them to Him, and not to take them back. Not to allow pride, stubbornness, rebellion to creep in, but to say, God, here is my heart. I'm giving it to you with an open hand. I won't take it back. I won't try to reclaim it for myself. I'm not living for me, God. I'm living for you because you have my heart. The first attitude that can lead us into the kind of spiritual slavery and bondage where we feel trapped by our situation and circumstance, or trapped by our relationships, or trapped by our emotions, or whatever it is, the first attitude is a refusal to give our hearts to God, to go before Him in humility, and to say, God, here's my heart. It's yours. I'm not taking it. It doesn't stop with Zedekiah. We see the next attitude in the scriptures, actually in verse 14. So it doesn't stop with King Zedekiah. Not only is Zedekiah a bad dude, not only is he evil before God, not only does he say, God, I want no part of you. I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to obey you. I'm not going to listen to the people, your prophet. I'm not going to listen to your mouthpiece. I'm not going to listen to any of that. I'm going to do what I want to do. We see second, the next attitude is ultimately an unwillingness to be holy. It's an unwillingness to be holy. See, if we aren't following God alone, then we're following others by default. If we're not following God alone, if God is not the only one who we obey and follow, by default we're following other things and other people. We may not think about it like that, but that's the case. It doesn't cease to be so. If we're not following God alone, we're following other things as well. To be holy means to be set apart for God. Holy before God is being used by Him exclusively. And we have a choice about who we're going to follow. And if it's not God alone, it's others. Whether it's other relationships, attitudes, habits, patterns of life, whatever the case is. If we're not following God alone, it's something else. Verse 14, it says, all the officers of the priests and the people likewise were exceedingly unfaithful. So it's not only Zedekiah, but the nation that he's leading. As they say, as go the leader, so goes the people. It's going on down to the people whom Zedekiah is leading. And it says, all the officers of the priests and the people likewise were exceedingly unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations. And they polluted the house of the Lord that He had made holy in Jerusalem. You see, an unwillingness to be holy first is rooted in infidelity to God. God is calling us to be faithful to Him and Him alone. And what does it say of His people here? The officers, the priests, the leaders of God's people, the people who were the spiritual go-to guys in their culture. It says, likewise, we're exceedingly unfaithful. Not even just on occasion. These guys weren't listening to God doing their own thing. They were exceedingly unfaithful. They completely said, God, you're not mine alone.